It's an interesting history, and it makes Victor all the more eager to study what this place has to offer. Even if it's just table scraps of the knowledge that Netheril had, it would still be an overwhelming amount of information for him. A scroll of remove disease, which seems odd considering the previous owner was a shadow lich. They didn't exactly fall ill. Rotted? Yes. Victor would have to have anything rotted removed. The lich may not have cared, but he certainly did. Bullet of Screaming. Many items of this type trace back to Jurgen Hammerloud, a celebrated dwarven warrior once known for his bellowing battle cry. He was quite despondent after an injury cost him his voice, so clan priests crafted sling bullets that, as they said, would take his screams straight to the enemy. A symbolic gesture, but Jurgen enjoyed them so much that he used them until the day he happily fell on the battlefield. Wow. That's another set of very potent bolts. Another enchantment he'd like to learn. And a potion. Wow. None of these are... Well, that's actually a pretty potent wand. Put it with his others. But these aren't overwhelmingly powerful, but they're still all enchanted. Enchanted weaponry is quite rare to come by. He might use that spear as a basis for his new staff. Another bookcase. Return of the Beast. At first glance, this ragged tome appears to detail the ancient history of the Sword Coast. Closer inspection reveals the words Return of the Beast scrawled across the original title in an almost childlike hand. All sections of the book are crossed out and replaced with indecipherable code and weird sketches. Fill the margins. At one point, the unnamed second author breaks into near coherence, though the entry is obscured by some sort of fluid or slime. A slow change. After ages of waiting, the beast that ruled the land returns to take back the world from the upstarts. The beast will make slaves of the 5 crowns and put whole races to the lash. The elves, the dwarves, and the kingdoms of men will all fall as one. Seems like blubbering to Victor. There were plenty of demonic lords that had tried that same thing repeatedly. If they couldn't do it, then whatever this beast was likely couldn't either. A couple more spells. It was worth seeing if he could learn any and put them in his spell book. Two of them could be placed in his spell book. Fantastic. Now, a glance around just to make sure he hasn't missed anything. But it looks like he's done fine. Moving on, he would now want to go check the laboratory. There wasn't anything to see in the Room of Faces, as it had been called. And he had little interest in it, though it would possibly allow him to study polymorph magic more securely. It was still not high on his priority list. And it would seem Basim was quite excited to work. Victor was having flashbacks of Deacon. In any case, there had been crafting materials in this. Some relatively high-end ones at that. It was something worth examining. The Shadow Forge, which was still a marvel for him. Countless books lined the shelves. Nothing that immediately caught his attention, though he would most certainly be reading all of them. A storage chest, which had the ecology of the golem, as well as the torso he'd seen earlier. Origin. Golems are magically constructed creatures widely used by mages proficient in the art of magic. With the help of spells, it is said that golems can be made from nearly any consistent material. The golem is bound to the caster and will serve him without question as long as the mage can keep control, usually by a control rod or ring. History. Golems seem to predate any known literature about their creation. The wizard who discovered the process, if indeed there was one, is unknown. Some of the rediscoveries have written their secrets in various arcane manuals, enchanted to aid the reader in construction. It is thought that the first golem created was a flesh golem, possibly on accident of some great wizard experimenting with reanimating human bodies. Flesh golems are easier to make than any other sort because they are made of organic material that once lived. Later, the process was generalized to suit certain earthen materials, which of course would produce much stronger golems. This did bring up an interesting thought. Victor wondered why Drogon did not have golems. Certainly, wandering around the home, it would make him stand out even more, and theoretically, it would render the entire idea of going into hiding moot. However, why not have them in his laboratory? Or standing guard, at least on the first floor? It was a little odd. He knew Drogon studied divine magic as well. Perhaps that was why his focus was too split. Special abilities. Most golems have some sort of special ability, dictated by the materials used in their creation. One can usually understand what abilities a golem is likely to have by simply looking at what it is made of. Golems made of iron are likely to be extremely strong, while a golem made of wood is likely to be vulnerable to fire. All golems share several traits in common. They are all immune to all forms of poison and cannot be affected by hold, charm, or fear, or other mind-based spells, as they have no minds of their own. In many cases, only certain spells can harm specific golem types. They also all have an annoying innate immunity to magic. It was quite a pain in the ass for someone like Victor. Of course, following that same line of thought, there was a species that were essentially sentient golems, if Victor could recall, known as the Warforged. The species were quite rare and only popped up occasionally, but Drogon had several books on them, and he'd found their anatomy and existence quite interesting. Habitat. As golems have little intelligence, they do not have the mind to do much on their own. If the golem serves someone, he does as his master wishes. If the golem is freed, it will likely be doing something he was set to do the moment he was released from the connection. If this is not possible anymore, and no further instructions are received, a golem may be reduced to its primary function, to keep itself alive either by seeking new tasks or by defining the little energy that is left as its life purpose. The golem then may react very unpredictably. An example of this, of course, would be the golem that Victor encountered in Undertide's upper levels. The ruins that... No, not in Undertide itself, but the ruins that teleported one to Undertide's location. Instead, the golem that had the dead creator behind it. That would be an excellent example of a golem that has lost its initial purpose and is, as such, just dedicating its energy to protecting its owner, even though it had been dead for thousands of years. Now, diet. Golems generally cannot eat, except the flesh golem, who can eat anything, although this consumption has no obvious purpose. However, golems do not need to eat food to survive. They in fact require nothing for sustenance. Golems live purely on magical energy. Mating. Golems, being artificially created, do not mate. This fact is so obvious, I'm not quite sure why I included it in this work. Then again, if it was so obvious, why are you reading this section? Because of completionist syndrome, I suppose. But yes, golems could not reproduce. Even flesh golems are not able to do so. They are sterile. They usually lack the required parts, as it were. The Shadow Golem torso. Victor is truly intrigued by this entire Shadow Golem concept. As the book detailed, golems created out of material are relatively common, especially wood or flesh, and stone or iron are more rare but entirely feasible. However, turning shadow into a physical material was such a foreign concept for Victor that it had to be something that was specifically tied to this dimension. It was incredibly unlikely that it would even survive in the prime. The shadows would distribute and become normal, quote-unquote, shadows at that point, most likely. This raised many questions on how useful even completing the Shadow Golem may be, assuming that by completing it, it even saw him as its master. Fiddling with other wizards' items, golems, and creations was always a very rocky road to travel. It was not something that Victor intended to go down without proper preparation. Without preparation, a wizard died. It was the same concept as summoning a demon with the spell Gate, and then forgetting to set up a basic spell of protection against alignment first, and suffering the repercussions. Another Journal of the Lich. Same as the rest. So he will, of course, check it for any spells. It does not appear to be protected with magical wards. Fair enough. Read the section on the magical golem. Golem making is dangerous. Like all major creations, it endangers the life of the creator. The source of danger, however, is not the golem, but the man himself. Or should I say Lich himself. Golems are all made from elemental material. So far, most prime wizards have only discovered how to use various earthen materials such as clay, stone, iron, and even glass to make golems. The exceptions, such as the flesh golem, use organic materials as components. According to legend, there are an almost infinite variety of ways to create a golem. The first golems were, undoubtedly, all traditional golems. Over the years, however, various scholars like myself have examined the techniques employed by earlier designers and modified them. Variants depend on the powerful forces of elemental or, in this case, extraplanar magic to animate them. Of course, no one has ever seen a shadow golem. It is legendary by most people considering a myth originating on the shadow plane. Working on legends such as these do, however, make my own life so much more interesting. Carving or assembling the golem's physical body is a difficult task. This is why I have hired skilled labor to do it for me. He should arrive with the last piece any day now. His crossing across the Darklands had best go unhindered, or I will make the denizens there pay. And this construct should keep those damnable shifters at bay. Interesting, so that does answer some of Victor's questions. The idea that the Shadow Lich essentially was using the Shadow Plane itself to fuel the golem's creation proved his theory that they're bringing the creature to another plane of existence without a proper link to the shadow to the Shadow Plane, rather, would be dire, as it would most likely kill the creature on exit. Or on entry, however you wish to look at it. Although the Shadow Forge did possibly offer a solution to this, it was hard to say. It would take much more study, and Victor had more than enough time. He had so much to do and so much to study. But as long as he kept his guard up, kept his wits about him, he should be able to improve himself enough and perhaps finally regulate and manage his inventory properly so that perhaps he'd stand a chance in this place. Yes, Basim, I'm very, very happy you're enjoying your work. Very well. It was time for him to begin. Who knows how long this would take, but perhaps once he was finally settled, he would be in a much better position. It wasn't quite respite, but it was as much as he deserved at this point. And perhaps with the power and skill he would gain from this, he could, well, return to the Prime and truly do some more good. Only time would tell, he supposed.